Hey love, thanks for checking out my channel here and this video wherever you happen to be seeing it. And if you are new to me and I'm new to you, my name is Michelle and I work as the soul translator as well as have Sensate Soul to support in elevating empathy, in celebrating sensitivity, and as well in helping empaths and spiritual empathic entrepreneurs bring their work, gorgeous self and soul and work, out into the world with your message and your magic. I kind of say that differently every time. That's the fun of creativity. So in today's video, this is part 2 of part 1, which please, if you haven't watched that yet, go ahead and check it out. This video will be, as I said, the part 2 of that. But there is, of course, a lead-in from the last video on the topic that I'm sure this will bring you, I hope it will, bring you great value as well in what I'm going to be sharing here. But the two fit together like pieces in a puzzle, so you may want to check that one out afterwards or now, whichever you choose, and then come back to this one. All right, so in today's video, we're going to be talking a bit more about empaths, emotional responsibility, and the energy of the emotions and the responsibility, as well as ways to have healthy boundaries when you feel like you are either responding with a certain amount of deflection, or if somebody is deflecting your true feelings. So in the last video, I talked about how this emotional responsibility can kind of be like a go-to default setting for a lot of empaths and sensitives, because we're raised doubting our own feelings, doubting our sensations, our intuitions, told that we're crazy for the things that we feel and share, because often they are of a deeper nature, or they are the unseen, or the things that other people may have not even acknowledged in themselves that they're emotionally feeling. You know, it's like I like to joke and say we're the canaries in the emotional coal mine, in the energetic coal mine. And so, you know, when we do share things, you know, sometimes people are very receptive, and often, and this is part of the empathic or the empath wounding that many of us have growing up, you know, where we get disregarded and dissed for sharing, and then we start doubting ourselves. So that's a common, unfortunate path that many of us travel. And to get out of that is about the empowered empath, which, by the way, I have a course on, and to be able to, you know, reclaim our gifts and our abilities and our sensate self, so to be able to use how we're truly made and designed for creativity, connection, and beautiful empathic intimacy and connection. This is a lot about heart and soul, and working with the energetics of our systems and of our sensate self. How this connects to this idea around emotional responsibility and the energetics of that is when you take the risk to share something that you're sensing or seeing or feeling, things sometimes are not received well. Now, many of us are learning how to communicate our feelings, first of all, to identify them and feel them, and then to be able to share them. That's a whole nother video, of course. So, of course, it depends on how you're sharing those things. But in general, in my experience, I gotta say, is that a lot of empaths and sensitives are extremely, overly, emphatically correct about what they share, in the sense of trying to be as, you know, kind and as non-confrontational and non, you know, blamey-shamey to others, because we know what that feels like. Empaths are really hardwired for connection and empathy. So it's like doing something with a real energy of rejection and a real energy of, you know, kind of like the FU energy, is not so shall we say, natural or comfortable for us, we generally will err on the side of caution and on the side of like, ooh, how can I put this in a way that you're going to understand it, and let me try to say it in a million different ways so that you will get me, so that you will see where I'm coming from. Meanwhile, what happens often is our real message and what we're really trying to say gets lost because we're being too careful with wrapping things up in ways that makes it palatable for the other person. So sometimes that's the very thing that stops empaths from emotionally sharing what's going on for us, because we're like, I don't want to reject the other person. I don't know how to say this without feeling like I'm going to reject the person. So I'm just going to hold back and not say anything. Meanwhile, we start churning and depressing and repressing the feelings and energies and emotions in us. And then, it does come out sideways. That's because it's human nature. That's like normal, but it doesn't have to be that way. But what I want to share here are a couple different levels of this. The first thing is that backlash can be because of like what I talked about in the last video, where it's a limitation of the other person. There's also the defensiveness energy that comes in, where when somebody, really feels like they underneath, it's kind of like their soul underneath is going, oh yeah, you're getting called out. Whoops, but you did do that, or you did say that, or sucks to be you right now, but it's pay up time. So this defensiveness can come out. We all have it when we feel that energy, the vibration of guilt, or a feeling of blame when we have done something that maybe wasn't really cool, wasn't okay. Which can turn into that feeling of shame, like we can feel like we've really screwed up and that we're not a perfect enough, aware enough, kind enough, fill in your enough, whatever it is, person. So that's all understandable, to have those reactions to things. And the energetics of that defensiveness, whether it's in ourselves or in others, is something to pay attention to. Is a moment of potential liberation where we can see, why am I triggered? Why am I defensive? What is this touching on that's bringing in up the defensiveness? What is the defensiveness I'm feeling from the other person? Not that you're trying to figure it out for them, but it's a valid question. And because it can help you understand the other person more if you can then have the conversation with them about it, if that's possible. But when you really are focusing more on yourself and feeling that defensiveness, when you're doing your inner work, you're giving yourself the opportunity to heal something because, a button got pushed. I don't know about you, but when I personally feel like I want to get into guilt or defensive mode, usually defense to cover some sort of guilt, is I'll start really pushing like my agenda, or I'll start insisting that I'm right. And there's that saying, you can either be right, do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? When the energy gets kind of built up and I can feel like I want to blast out, there's nothing wrong with anger, because anger is a temporary emotion and energy that can really help catalyze change. But when it comes from a consistent defensive kind of place, then it's usually covering up for a lower vibration of guilt. Guilt is a collapsing energy, because underneath guilt, then we get into shame. If we go through guilt and then blame and then shame, in the sense of the hum of those frequencies. But usually it's the anger and the defensiveness and needing to be right that is kind of on top of that is protecting those. And it can feel like that need to be wanting to be right. So that usually energetically is a signpost that there is some anger that's covering up for the guilt and anything else underneath there. When you feel the energy coming at you like that, it is usually the other person's insecurity that also they are defending what they felt underneath. And it can come across feeling like a wall, feeling like a blast. Sometimes, this is another little one to pay attention to, is sometimes it can come across as a passionate kind of, war cry. But there's a very strong difference between when it's a defensive kind of, pushback or when it is a, no, this is really how I feel. You'll feel yourself respond to it in either an inspiring, enhance, a expansion way, or you'll feel yourself want to pull back and retract from it and contract from it. So this is where we pay really attention to the energetics of communication and to that energetic exchange, because it is very, very telling. That's why being in touch with our body and our sensate selves is so important, because you won't figure this stuff out from your head. If you're trying to figure, like I get that image of, there's that, I don't remember what culture it's from, but there's two heads. It's a drawing, old drawing, where there's two heads and they're put, head to head, and there's steam and lightning and everything coming out from them. So when you try to figure out these energetics from a headspace, it's not going to work. It's really about, how do I feel in response to this person speaking to me? How do I feel in response to how I'm connecting to them? Do I feel my heart expanding as I'm trying to share my feelings and share how something has affected me? Or do I feel like I've got to be right here, because that's coming from there? Here's another part of this to consider. Often, whether it's in ourselves or others, when there is a defensiveness, exaggeration of it doesn't necessarily meet the exchange of it. Meaning, like certain things that are going on in the political arena right now, this, I'm right, everyone's wrong, I don't want to be discovered, I want to remain in my place of ego, I don't want my reputation tainted. And you can apply this to yourself, ourselves, when we're feeling this, because we all do sometimes when we don't want to be called out for something that we did or didn't do, consciously, unconsciously. When it's this really big exaggeration type of reaction, it's usually covering up for something underneath. And that's just kind of like energetic common sense, right? Because if you don't have anything to feel guilty about, you usually don't fight tooth and nail to protect it. So let's talk about two more angles of this before we get to the end of this video. The first one is, when you've done something that has been insensitive, or somebody has done something that is insensitive to you, and you have an emotional, normal, understandable response, reaction, even whatever you want to call it, but let's just say a response, because that's a little bit more pure than reaction. But when you have that feeling, what really is healing in that moment is for your emotions to be acknowledged, for you to acknowledge the other person's emotions. Because the thing is, there's a big difference between acknowledgement and responsibility. Acknowledgement is a very pure empathic response, and saying, whether it's to yourself or to others, that I can see that something that I have said or done has negatively affected you, has emotionally affected you. And I believe that that's true for you. I validate and trust that that is true for you, because you're having this response. Whatever your opinion of it might be is a different thing. But to acknowledge the simple humanity of somebody else's emotional world, or of your own, or to ask that others respect and honor your emotional world when you express it, that's empathy in action. That's so incredibly healing. And that's different from taking responsibility. Unless you did something that you truly, truly say, I am taking accountability for what I said or did because I really do see how this hurt you. And that's, when you really have screwed up. And you can say that to yourself or others. But then the other part, the acknowledgement, can be that I don't need to understand whether or not this is true, right, or wrong. What I can see is that something that I've done or said or not done has affected you, and you took the risk to share that with me, and therefore I'm going to acknowledge it as true for you. So that's just a really simple way to have an empathic response with others and also with yourself. So the last part I want to share here in this video is, if you are an empathic entrepreneur, a sensitive spiritual entrepreneur, and there's something that you do have that kind of passionate message and cry of what's important to you and why you are willing to put yourself out there to stand up and strong for it, that can have a feeling of, that adamant kind of, passionate mission energy. But it's very different from the make wrong. Like, for instance, my intolerable, as I've shared in other videos, is really identifying what's that intolerable thing. Mine is people being insensitive to each other and to themselves and to the world and the planet and animals. It's really like I want sensitivity and to have a forefront, a center space in lives, in our society, in ourselves, and I want there to be a release and a change in sensitivism, as I call it, because I have a strong conviction that sensitivity and being a sensate self is how we feel alive. It's how we feel connected to each other. It's how we feel connected to our souls and to our lives and the non-physical of life around us. It's where the intuition and the ideation, the inspiration, everything. So feeling like you want to defend what matters to you as an empath and an empathic entrepreneur, and being passionate about that, is a very different energy than defending something because you're making others wrong. So there's a very clear energetic distinction between the two. Again, one is expansive, one is uplifting, the other is more of a put down energy and a feeling like of judgment, basically. So those are two really big distinctions to use when you are working as an empath and as an entrepreneur, and you can use them to be incredible fuel for getting your message out there in the world and caring about it and having the tenacity to keep showing up and be out in the energetics and emotions of the world doing your work that only you can do. All right, there we have it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what you heard here, please do subscribe to my channel, as well as like the video wherever you happen to be seeing it. Do add a comment. I'd love to continue this conversation with you. And also find me over at soultranslator.com, as well as Sensate Soul. And you'll be able to get onto my newsletter list there so that you can get information that I only share through private emails, as well as offerings and different freebies and things that I love to give and create and then give in support of you to be the most empowered empath, amazing sensate sensitive, and empathic entrepreneur that you dream and that your soul dreams to be. All right, take so much care and so much love. See you in the next video.